Google Stadia provides both the best and the worst way to play when it comes to cloud gaming. And while that statement does seem a bit odd, I do want to bring that up as today's discussion topic. As always, I encourage you to share your own thoughts and opinions down in the comment section below. I'm going to start off with why I think it's the best place to play when it comes to game streaming, and it all has to do with technology. Like it or not, I would still argue that Stadia is way ahead of the pack when it comes to pure playability. And while its peers and competitors have certainly improved, there's still a lot that separates Stadia from the rest. To this day, it remains as the only cloud gaming platform, one with its own ecosystem and features such as achievements, friends list, and more. Games that get ported over to Stadia are built for Stadia, and while that doesn't necessarily mean the game's gonna be a good port, it does mean developers will see Stadia as more of a console than anything else, and this is a good thing for a variety of reasons. Case in point, look at FIFA 22. It's promising the next-gen experience on Stadia, but the PC version of the game is not getting it. And to be clear, this probably has a lot less to do with EA's development teams being lazy on the PC copy, but more to do with the fact that when they're building a game for PC, they need to be aware and compromise as much as they can to cast the widest net to catch the most players. What I'm trying to say here is that they want to make sure the game can run on as many low-end systems as possible. Stadia, on the other hand, doesn't need to have that set of restrictions, and instead is getting the next-gen port of the game. This is something worth considering, because if the game were ever to come out on Amazon Luna or GeForce Now, it would just be running the PC version. There are certainly downsides to this as well, and I will be sure to touch on that later in the video. But for now, let's talk about the other point that really makes Stadia stand out. And as I said, that's the back-end technology. Google has clearly been investing in this in a big way for a long time. It still has the unique benefit of being the only place where you can stream your game in 4K. And while its peers over at Amazon Luna have touted that this feature will be coming one day, they haven't released any updates on when since it was officially announced. And while the inclusion of 4K streaming may sound a bit unimportant to you, especially if you don't have a 4K display, if you're able to, I would highly suggest you download Stadia Enhanced and force 4K even on your 1080p display because the difference is huge. Image clarity is highly improved, and finer details don't tend to get lost in the video encoding. And we can't talk about Stadia without mentioning its latency. Under ideal conditions, Google Stadia can actually have lower latency than some local hardware. Red Dead Redemption 2 is a perfect example, and these results are coming directly from Digital Foundry. It's honestly a shame that there aren't more people trying to do these sort of latency tests on Stadia or other cloud gaming platforms for that matter, because I do think some people would be surprised by certain results. Google Stadia really shines when a game plays at 60 frames per second, and I think many people in the community have started to notice it. Those games tend to be the best ports and the one that the community is always praising, be it The Division 2, Doom Eternal, and much more. By now I think you get the point though. I think Stadia is one of the best places to do your cloud gaming simply because the technology powering it is bar none the best in class. But now I want to talk about why I think it's also one of the worst places to do your cloud gaming. And we're going to begin by taking on the elephant in the room, and that's its game library. Look, I need to begin by stating that Google Stadia has been doing a better job of consistently putting out games onto its platform. Compared to its first year, this second one has definitely had more of a steady flow of games, but a lot of those games aren't necessarily the titles that I think people want to see on the platform. Many of them are indie games, and there's nothing wrong with that, but those aren't really the big crowd pleasers. And you can see evidence of this within the Stadia community itself, along with me and many other content creators covering the platform. While we do like to celebrate when games arrive on Stadia, it becomes a huge deal when a big AAA title is day and date on Stadia. And it needs to be said, it's made a big deal because oftentimes that's not the case. While big names have hit Stadia this year, there are also a ton of names that haven't. Even if we just take a look at the rest of 2021, we're going to be missing out on games like Battlefield, Call of Duty, obvious choices, but also other big name games like Back 4 Blood, Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy, Diablo 2 Resurrected, the Crysis Remastered Trilogy, and more. And those are just games I'm listing off the top of my head. There are probably plenty others. It's also worth pointing out that some sequels that did have their previous entry on Stadia aren't getting them this year. F1 2021 and NBA 2K22 are prime examples of this. And then there are sequels that we're not sure are being brought over, like Lost Judgment. As I stated, this is an issue that will improve over time as more games get added, and I do think Google Stadia is doing a better job this year than last. As I mentioned earlier in the video, the fact that Stadia games need to be designed for Stadia is also a factor that needs to be taken into account. It's probably the primary reason why a service like GeForce Now has over 1,000 games already supported and Google Stadia is hitting over 200. And the very fact that it's its own platform also causes the second issue I want to discuss here, and that's its user base. As someone who loves playing multiplayer games, Google Stadia is not it. I'd be extremely hesitant to recommend a game that has a huge multiplayer focus on Stadia if it doesn't have crossplay support, because chances are you won't be able to find anyone to play with. There are way too many games on Stadia that I've wanted to hop into to play some multiplayer sessions and actually couldn't because there simply weren't enough players. I'm really thankful that crossplay has become a feature that is starting to get much more support with new releases, because I'm not sure how Stadia would fare without it. Now look, to be plain and simple, both of these criticisms that I have against Stadia are things that I do think are a big deal in the here and now. It's why I think the growth in terms of player base has been a bit of a slow burn for Stadia. With that said, I don't think it's anything that Google couldn't dig themselves out of. If they're willing to and continue to keep pushing money forward to make Stadia a better platform and bring more games over, I genuinely believe it'll solve both issues. I think players will come once the games are here. It's really up to Google to put that investment in and make that change happen. Either way, you've heard my thoughts on the topic, now let me hear yours. How do you feel about Stadia? Is it the best place for cloud gaming, maybe the worst, or maybe somewhere in between? Let me know down in the comment section below. If you enjoyed today's video or found it helpful at all, be sure to hit that like button as it really does help the channel out, and if you're wanting more content like this, be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell as well. As always, thank you for watching the video. This has been The Virtual Cloud, giving you the latest and greatest on everything cloud gaming and VR related, and until next time, I'll catch you in the clouds.